Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Into the Terminal. As you might have guessed from the two people you're seeing in stream right now, we're changing things up a little bit this week. I am not Scott. I'm Nate. Usually I'm the demo guy, but today I'm joined by someone who's a little bit more expert on the topic we're talking about. So say hi.
Hello, all. My name is Joshua Loscar. I also go by JScar. Good to see y'all. Good to see you, Nate.
You might recognize JScar from our chat every week. He's here often enough that we decided to just make him part of the show. It's lots of fun. So we're going to be talking about compliance today with OpenSCAP, right? And Josh has a decent background in security and compliance and whatnot, so we thought we'd bring him in for the show. So, Josh, do you want to hop into our critical path demo here? We're going to talk about kind of scanning for compliance and what OpenSCAP tools are available to us, and then in the deeper dive we're going to talk a little bit more about why, right? So
absolutely right. So just to lay down some groundwork, that OpenSCAP is the tool that we're using for security automation that can be used to check and enforce security configurations. To get started with this, let's just jump on in. First, we're going to install OpenSCAP. And this is simple enough. We can just go sudo yum install OpenSCAP-scanner. We're doing TAC-Y for yes for automatic install, for saying, yes, I want to install these packages. Next, we're going to go through and install the SCAP security guide. And that's a install TAC security TAC guide. Once that's installed, we should be good to go. From here, I'm realizing that I might have grabbed the same terminal that we've already been working with, which is awesome. Let's go paste. This is the way to be able to verify that things have been downloaded in the right order. So you can see underneath user share XML SCAP SSG. We'll go over a little bit more of this later. But the long story short is we see this RHEL 9 is installed. All right. So to get ourselves up and running, let's find out what OpenSCAP goes through and the commands that we need to go through and do. So we can just simply go OSCAP. And we've got our usages, our different commands. So we're going to go OSCAP, put our commands in, module and operation. So as an example, we're going to do this guy, which is OpenSCAP info. We're finding out information about the SSG for RHEL 9, which is the security guide. There are a lot of different frameworks that you can go through and harden your system to. So we've got STIGs, we've got the CIS benchmark. So that's what we have here. We can see that there's benchmark for level 2 server, benchmark for level 1 server, level 1 workstation, and level 2 workstation. We'll go more into the details or the differences between there. And let's go ahead and get this thing kicked off. We're going to start off with the super basic just for the demo purposes for now. We're going to go with the CIS server 1. So let me clear the screen again here and let's paste this. So we're going sudo OpenSCAP. We're running a couple of different commands here to be able to evaluate our system. And the profile is going to be for the CIS server level 1 for RHEL 9. So let's go ahead and hit enter. This is going to take a minute or so for it to run. Not too long because it's just doing a, hey, here's the snapshot of what your system currently looks like. Nate, you have anything to add?
So this is actually going out and checking the configuration on the system, and it's comparing it to the configurations that are defined within the SCAP security guide. So this will actually give you pass-fail on all the different rule sets and whatnot that are in there. So pretty handy tool.
Absolutely.
Great for baselining, right?
Absolutely. That's the important point, is that if you're a sysadmin coming blind or you just inherited systems that you have no idea where the compliance level is, this is a great place to find out where your starting point is before you start changing anything. So this will only take another minute or so. The cool thing is that it comes up with the title, the rule, and the identifier, which if you're in compliance or you need to be able to say that you're compliant with a certain ID, this one says the CCE and then the number. It's a great way to be able to cross-reference. So it's done running pretty quick. Let's go ahead and make a report from this. And let's make sure we get the copy.
Yeah, so it's great that it outputs it to the screen, but you can actually have it generate a report file, which you can then save and view offline, which is pretty handy.
And compare it to your other machines, maybe that's on your network or the before and after when you harden, right? So in this case, we're going sudo OSCAP. We're going to generate report, and then we're telling the output is going to be OpenSCAP _report-file. And let's go ahead and hit enter on this. This won't take that long. Yes, we can absolutely clear the screen to be able to see the full command here. Let me cancel this, go clear, and I'll do that every time from here moving forward. So as we go through and generate the report, tac output, it's going to do it to this. It's not going to take that long because it's converting it from an XML over to an HTML file, because you can do this and either just a report that you can look on the command line, or you can also do it as HTML. We're just going to go through and look through it through an old school terminal browser called Lynx. This gives us the ability to look at web pages just in our console.
Yep. So Lynx is a text mode web browser. If anybody's not familiar with it, you can view this in a full browser as well. But to be honest, the output isn't much better. It's a pretty simple. It's a pretty simple thing, but it's maybe it's easier to read if you have it in a browser.
Right. So as an example, if you only had this on a server versus over on a GUI system, you could still look at this if you didn't SCP it over to your box or such. So if we scroll down here, we can actually see the scoring system. And of course, I did this on the same box after I did a hardening. So that's awesome. We can go through and talk about that a little bit more, because apparently when I opened up a second tab, my demo system is good. It's already hardened. So we can go through and see from the scoring system percentage-wise how hardened this box is. By default, this is much lower before you go through and harden things. And if we go through and quit, I think we're ready to go into the next section.
All right. So we went over some of the basics here, right? So you can see how to scan your system, how to output a report. In the deeper dive, though, you're going to want to stick around, because we're going to talk about how to actually remediate some of those things. We're going to touch on what these rule sets are, why you should care, what the differences might be between different levels of CIS. And we're going to show you a couple more examples and whatnot. So stick with us. Remember, also make sure to hit that like button if you like this content. That's how we know we're doing a good job. And yeah, we'll see you after the break. All right, welcome back. So, Josh, I mentioned at the beginning of the show that you've got a little more of a background in security. You want to talk just like really briefly about why the heck it is we have you talking about OpenSCAP instead of just me or Scott?
Absolutely. So my background is working as a DoD contractor. Did this for 5-6 years as a Linux system admin in disconnected air-gapped networks. So was responsible for hardening everything up to STIG levels. So I love working with security, love working with Linux. So I'm here to be able to say, hey, here's the beginning onboarding steps on how to get up and running. And the first important step is to find out where that baseline is. So if we have something to be able to jump off of, we can then start hardening for our environment. And it's not cookie cutter. It definitely needs to have customizations for your environment. So we have the frameworks there to be able to reference and then jump in deeper.
And I feel like it's worth mentioning, even though we didn't make this a topic for the show, but I think we have had a previous show about the Insights compliance tool. If you've got RHEL, you have Insights. If you got your system registered with Insights, you can install that SCAP security guide tool that Josh showed earlier. And then Insights can actually do similar work to what we just showed at the command line. So just keep that in mind. Put it in your back pocket if you want something that's a little more GUI related, right? So
absolutely right. So
Josh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it, Nate.
I was going to say, what's OpenSCAP?
Absolutely. So it is actually a shorthand for the Open Security Content Management or Application Protocol. So it's a command line tool that's helped us perform configuration and vulnerability scans on our local system. The idea is that we're trying to make sure we find out what framework we're trying to apply, and then either find out the status of our system compliance, or we actually can enforce that as well.
Cool. So basically, this is a way to easily, I should say, maybe more easily, not just scan, but apply rule sets to our systems. And trust me, we're going to show that a little bit later in the show. So, but why do we care?
Why do we care? That's a fantastic question. We care because if we're trying to make sure that there are not intruders who can get into our systems, we're trying to make it
Yeah.
a little bit harder for them to do so. We're never going to be hacker proof or breach proof, but we can absolutely do our due diligence to make sure that our systems are hardened to a reasonable level, and making sure it's not too much of a pain in the butt for our users either.
And everybody's favorite word is compliance, right? So
Right.
whether we're doing this to do our due diligence or whether we're doing this because we've been asked to, some of us in the world of systems administration have to adhere to certain compliance standards, right? So
Absolutely.
this is another way to help you get into compliance, right? So you could have an auditor come in and say, this is all the stuff you have to do, and then you can manually go find and do all the things.
Mhm.
If you harden your systems using OpenSCAP before that ever happens, then that list should be a lot shorter.
It should be. And this also depends on what type of industry that you're in. There are going to be these different frameworks. And while we're focusing on CIS today, there are a couple different levels that go along with that. We'll cover other frameworks in the future. And
Mhm.
it's going to be interesting to see. There are a lot of crossovers with the same controls or the same reasons that you would go through and do something on like a CIS versus a STIG. So on the CIS side of the house, the level ones, you usually start off with, here's the core minimum that you want to get started with. And then if you, when we were looking at that list of a level 2, those are going the above and beyond, or the more advanced features to start locking things down a bit more.
So we're throwing around the term CIS a lot. What is the CIS?
That absolutely. The CIS is another, again, acronym. It's for the Center of Internet Security. So it is a nonprofit responsible for creating these controls and benchmarks. So from their site, they're saying they're globally recognized as best practices for securing IT systems and data. Long story short, it's to help people, businesses, and governments protect themselves against pervasive cyber threats, as their long and short.
So would you say that CIS is probably maybe like a good starting point for even folks who maybe aren't mandated to follow certain standards, but it would be just good practice?
I would tend to agree with that. Yes, the STIG side of the house is much more stringent. CIS
Yeah.
is much more globally accepted. So that would be like a number one would be CIS, number two would be STIG. I'm also slightly biased because of my background. I think it's a good starting platform for everybody, though.
Right. And there's two levels of CIS. I assume the second level is a little more stringent. First level
Yes,
might be a little bit less stringent. And then there's even a variant for workstation, right? So if you needed to harden
absolutely,
your workstations, you can apply the CIS workstation benchmark, which is also kind of cool. It's nice that
absolutely.
those exist.
Because you've got the GUI applications that aren't necessarily there installed on the server side, and makes sense to have two different sets of hardening levels, right?
Right. Right. All right. So we have another demo, but before we do that, I'm going to ask, did we have any questions that we should try to answer before we get there? Or, I mean, okay, is it possible to check just for specific controls of CIS compliance and also fix those? So I can answer, can you fix those? Yes, we're going to show that in a minute.
Absolutely.
But
Yep.
Josh, can we check for specific controls? I don't know if we can get that granular.
So you can go through and customize this to where you are only checking for X, Y, or Z. You can comment it out in the XML. There's a couple different
Okay.
viewers for that. So yes, it's just not there by default.
It's not just like a command line argument you can throw in to say, don't
Right.
check for these, only check for that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. You're going to change it individually for your files. And I would usually recommend making a copy of your file before you go through and change the original, and then say, here's your customization number one for your organization name, etc.
Okay. Did we have any other questions? I think I saw one just pop in, which we kind of touched on, but didn't really cover in depth. Here we go. Came from
Ooh.
Rick.
Okay.
How does CIS benchmark compare to PCI? In other words, if you harden to CIS, will it pass a PCI audit? Now, by the fact that there is another rule set for PCI makes me feel like the answer is no, it won't.
So, like I said before, there's a lot of rule sets that cross over, like between CIS and STIG. There are some
Right.
rule sets that will cross over from CIS over to PCI, but it's not a 100% mapping. So, if your organization requires you to be PCI compliant, you could go CIS, but it's only going to get you partway there. While we're
Right.
talking about OpenSCAP today, scanning it for compliance is one deal. Hardening it in some use cases, when you're actually trying to remediate it to a certain level, is going to be different in your organization. You may not have your machine set up correctly to do that out of the box, and it may require a reinstall and enforcing those on the installation of the OS, which you guys have gone over in the past on the drop-down install options.
Yep. We'll have to find a link to that episode as well. We'll put that in the notes.
Absolutely.
All right. So we did a CIS scan. We did a scan for CIS level 1.
That's correct.
I think we have another demo. We're going to compare that to the CIS level 2, right? So if we want to hop back to the terminal, we can do that.
Absolutely. So one of the things, I just updated or grabbed a different box and reran through everything. So I do want to do our last 2 steps again, just to make sure everybody sees what the hardness level is from just a scanning of your system. And let's go take a look at this report. So if we scroll down now, So as compared to before the break, I was on a different box. I just ran through just the checking to see where the default level is of a RHEL 9 install for this purpose. So it's 77.22% to get started. Right.
So this is like a clean install. You haven't applied any SCAP policies to this machine, whereas the one you were using before the break, you'd already done some work to apply.
Yes.
So okay.
That is correct.
So this is the base level. This is the CIS level 1. Correct. 77% roughly. Or 77 score. I don't know if that's a percentage.
It is a percentage. Yep.
Maximum is 100. So there you go.
You got it. So great. So if we go through and we can quit out of this terminal, if I scroll down my notes here, and if you wanted to go and see a scan of level 2, it's pretty simple. Again, we're just going to do a scan. We're not going to go through and change anything yet.
We're basically using the. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. The CIS level 2 is how you can see the file name called out for the different profile that we're now scanning against.
Right.
Go ahead.
So we're doing the same command. We're just telling it, use this other profile.
Correct. And make this easier on everybody. Let me clear this and put it back at the top of the screen.
Control L, man.
Control L. Okay. All right. Good call. There's always more than one way to do things in Linux. So it's going to run. It's going to go through and rerun through this. This will only take about a minute to go through and do this level 2 eval. And then I figured the next step that we could go through and talk about is applying CIS level 1 remediation. And then you can see the level that the machine comes to just for the level 1.
So again, this is CIS level 2, which means it's going to be slightly more stringent. We should expect a worse score because, again, we haven't changed anything yet. We didn't apply CIS level 1. So look at that. Billy Holmes didn't know about Control L.
Nice.
So you're not alone, Josh.
Absolutely. There we go. I'm here to learn and teach what I know, right? So let's do this thing. All right, so we've gone through and run it. Let's go ahead and check for that file now. We've got this, so we're going to open this with links.
Do you need to generate the HTML file first?
Yep. Oop, good call. And of course, that's the one area I didn't copy paste.
You could look at the XML file, I suppose.
Right. I think we should be able to.
It has the data in it. It just would be a lot harder to read.
Let's reconvert that real quick. So while I'm doing that in the background, if I've got a little bit more information on the level 2s, like I said, it is going a little bit more in depth. So it's the defense in depth is intended for the environment. So getting started with the level 1s makes a lot more sense for everybody to get started. And let's generate this output so I'm not completely messing things up here. So the output is going to be OpenSCAP 2.
Should be the same command as before. Just got to paste in the new input and output files, right?
Yep, absolutely. And I should put this at the top again. And this is what you get for not having it copy pastable. Good job.
Yeah, well, you're on into the terminal. There's always something unexpected that happens, right?
There we go. So report file number 2. Report file number 2. Come on. Dupe. And that's what we've got inside of our notes, just to verify here. And Nate, I'll have you take over for a second on camera while I get this last set up and copy that to our notes.
Did we have any more questions that we need to talk about in the chat? I think we got them all covered. So what Josh is doing here is just basically taking the same command from earlier. Oh, here's a question. Can we create custom controls, for instance, for Tomcat or JBoss?
Can we create custom controls?
You can customize the existing rule sets. I don't know. I guess if you knew how to write OpenSCAP rule sets, you could make your own controls.
Right.
That's kind of a tough one, though.
Absolutely, right.
So, and there, a lot of these take into consideration a number of different applications. So it could be that there's already rules in there that apply to Tomcat, if those are in the scope of the CIS, for example. I'd have to go look. I don't know if they're in there or not.
Right.
Okay. We got Billy Holmes in there giving us the clear commands, the ASCII escape sequences to clear the screen because he didn't know about Control L.
Nice. Right. Again, always more than one way to do things in Linux.
Yeah.
All right. This is results. Results CIS file. Here we go. So this should be correct now. We've renamed it to where it's going to be OpenSCAP report file 2.html from the OpenSCAP results file CIS level 2. So let that generate. And then we don't need to reinstall links. We can just go through and open that file up here in just a second. Yep. Okay. And I'm just going to keep on doing what I know, which gotta love it. Links, we're going to go OpenSCAP. And that's going to be results HTML. That's going to be reports 2. All right. So
yay.
Finally got there. That's what I get for not copying and pasting everything.
Well, it happens.
So the level 2 CIS out of the box is going to be a 67.32% out of 100. So again, we've got lots of different things that we can go through and harden it to your organization to where this should not be a one size fits all. You need to talk about risk for your environment. So one of the things that Nate and I were talking about before was maybe you're in an environment that you need to have your USB blocked. So if you're inside of let's say a gas station, and the end terminal system that you go through and pay cash to be able to go pump gas, it's got USBs in the back that's available for somebody to walk up and plug in a USB. You should probably be blocking it there, versus if you're a bank behind a teller system in a window, maybe that's not so much of a threat. That's going to differ per environment why you'd go through and turn those on or off, right?
And there's a tool in RHEL called USB Guard that'll help you do that. I haven't used it myself. Maybe I should brush up on that because it sounds like a pretty useful tool. I know, like in the old days, they used to fill USB ports with epoxy to keep people from doing that. Remember that?
Oh, it hurts. It still hurts me to see that. I remember they had locking ones too, to where you could put a device inside and lock it to where it wasn't permanently destructive, and then you could put in a special key to pull it back out. Right.
That's probably better than filling it with epoxy.
It's a little bit less damage, that's for sure.
Great solution, but a little permanent.
Absolutely, right? So if we want to go through and step back now into remediating that CIS level 1, we can go through and do that if we're ready.
Yeah, so there's been some chat about customization on rule sets and whatnot, and the topic of SCAP Workbench has been brought up. There is a tool that's currently in RHEL called SCAP Workbench, which you can use to view and modify these policies. However, that is deprecated. So it's not gone yet, but it will be gone. I don't know what version of RHEL it's going to go away, and it could be gone in 10. It might not be. I don't know if anybody in chat has more info about that. I know we got a number of Red Hatters that might be closer to the situation. But just keep that in mind. Today you could use it, but it could be gone soon.
Absolutely, right. One of the other things that's awesome about OpenSCAP is that you can remediate via Bash scripts or via Ansible. So while SCAP Workbench may be going away, if you've got Ansible Tower or something the like, you're able to go through and run these and still have that GUI thinking. So it looks like Scott's got a response on SCAP Workbench is not in CentOS Stream 10. So you take from that what you will.
Pretty indicative, right? All right.
Absolutely, right?
So we looked at the report. We saw that CIS 1 and CIS 2 had different we had different scores because, of course, we're scoring the same system with a more stringent rule set, right? So that was just a
Right.
good example to show, yes, in fact, CIS 1 and 2 are different, and yes, you can scan for either of them. So now the moment I think everybody's been waiting for is, okay, great, I have a report. What do I do with it? And I think you've got queued up the command right there. We're going to apply, what is that, CIS 1 or
It
2?
is CIS level 1. So this is
Okay.
the standard that everybody quote unquote should be running according to CIS, as we're level
Hmm.
2 is the more hardened. So the cool part is, let's go ahead and hit enter on this. It's not going to take that long for it to go through and run.
Right.
It'll go through and tell you what passed, what failed. And then the new thing that you're going to see on screen is it's going to say fixed or fixing when it comes to certain items here that weren't enforced before.
Right. And
So
again, this is something that you could do with the Insights Compliance tool. Once you have a rule set defined and you've applied it and you got your report back, you can also remediate right from Insights. So you don't have to do it
absolutely.
at a command line like this if you're an Insights user.
If you're an Insights user, and then I believe you also need to have RHC installed, which is
Yes,
the system role.
yeah, you'd have to have remote execution or remote commands or whatever we call it set up so that you can actually remediate from Insights.
Absolutely. And Eric has a great point on Insights and Satellite are also great solutions. So we can actually see
Yeah,
now on screen, it says starting remediation. So
right. Here we go.
there's
Here's the
there's
fun
our
part.
first
All
one.
the yellow fixed.
Absolutely, right? So the first thing is that's installing aid, which is the ability to find out, here's like a snapshot of your system. Did anything change on this? Aid is amazing when it comes to turning it on and turning up the logging level, because you can see if there's a new file created, modified,
Yeah.
changed. It's amazing.
The aid, if I remember correctly, that'll do checksums, or am I thinking of FA policy D? Maybe that's what
Right.
I'm thinking of. One of them
No,
will do checksums that'll make sure that the package the executable that you're running matches the checksum that it got from RPM when it was installed or from DNF.
correct. So it's
I think that's FA policy D.
the advanced intrusion detection environment is what AID stands for.
Right.
So it does that file integrity checking. So it's comparable. You'll have different multiple algorithms that'll go through and check, like MD5, SHA-1, 256, etc. And then it'll report to say, hey, what has changed between last time you scanned and now? Or if you've set that up on like a cron job.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a cool feature in RHEL 9 called remote attestation, which uses keylime, which leverages both AID and FA policy D to let you do that checksum verification from a remote centrally managed system, right? So
Ooh,
it's really
nice.
cool, again, for those endpoint systems that are out in the wild that maybe you can't easily get to verify, right? Uh, Keylime will, report back to a centralized server and say, hey, this system, it doesn't look like the day you installed it. Maybe you want to check into that. So cool,
Awesome.
cool feature of RHEL 9.
Looking forward to playing more with that here in the future, because there's more and more that's getting integrated with Keylime that I'm excited about.
Cool. So
We're at the tail end here, almost wrapping
running
this up.
through, let this run, and then we're going to do another scan, right, to see, hey, how do we score now?
Exactly. What we're going to go through and do is do another, what are our results now? And then we'll look at that report, and that pretty much wraps. I see something came in chat. Can you talk about using the image builder tool to create a gold image for security baseline? I think there is an episode on that. And I think we can go through and grab a link to that. Or we'll
Yeah,
actually,
we have done episodes about image builder. I think we've done, and we have a bunch of content on the Red Hat Enterprise Linux YouTube channel, which you're all watching at the moment anyway, uh, about image builder. Both, I think everything that's up there right now is about the Insights image builder tool.
absolutely, right? So on screen, I'm just exporting the results real quick to a readable format. So we'll give it a second here. And if you guys have any other questions, throw it in the chat. Happy to answer, because we're just about ready to wrap up. Hopefully you found this interesting and helpful. And if there's other different frameworks that you're looking for help on or examples from, would love to hear that, so we could go through and help cover that in the future.
Yep, image builder is a fun tool. I actually I've recently started using Image Builder to make the base images I use for my labs. So
Nice.
whenever I run a new system in my hypervisor down in the basement, it's based on an Image Builder system, an Image Builder based image, or Image Builder built image. Words are hard today, guys.
Okay.
And I've recently, since we've been talking more about OpenSCAP, not just for this episode, but in general, right? Image Builder has the ability to build those SCAP policies in at image build time. I've been thinking about, maybe not for the lab machines, but for any of like the home services machines and whatnot that I'm running.
Hmm.
Maybe I want to start applying CIS or something to those, so that
Ooh, I like that
they
idea.
have a slightly better level of security out of the box.
Absolutely, right? So scrolling on down to after we've gone through and remediated for level 1, we're now at an 98.02%. A lot
Nine.
more than
So
what we
what?
were.
So Josh, why isn't it 100? We just applied all the stuff.
We did, but like I said before, we have to be able to scope what things are in our risk environment, and maybe like there was one that did not go through and pass, like going through and setting a password for grub.
Yeah,
You probably want to go through and customize that password
right.
for grub instead of going through and just trusting the script to go do
There,
it for you.
yeah, there's certain rules, and this gets more and more true as you get into the more hardened rule sets. There's certain rules that are difficult to automatically apply, right? Maybe it could automatically apply them, but the example I always use is some of these rule sets require that say /temp is a separate file system.
Right.
How do you do that through automation without asking the administrator how, like, what space would you like me to use to allocate to temp, right? It's hard to automate that. Now, at image build time, you can automate that,
Exactly.
but
Yes.
after a system's deployed, like that could cause problems if it tried to do it automatically. So there are some exceptions here, right? If you're applying these rules to a system that already exists, and that's a whole other conversation we could have.
It's a deep
If you're
dive.
walking into a job as a security person or as a systems administrator, and you've been asked to get your systems into compliance, blindly running OpenSCAP against all your production systems is probably a bad idea, right? You're
100%.
going to want to
Yep.
scan them. You're going to want to see what's acceptable. You're going to see what's reasonable to change. You're going to want to change those things and then maybe make standards for the next build, for example, that you
Absolutely.
can apply a more hardened rule set. So, these are conversations you're going to have with whoever asked you to harden the systems. Like, yeah, I could totally do that, but it's going to take this much downtime to make that happen. And then they have to accept that, right? So, all conversations that you're going to have.
To Billy's point, yeah, he's saying that Ansible can't fix everything. Some policy based, some are process and people. You're absolutely right. My notes were
Yes.
procedures, policies, and risk management are all part of this conversation that you have to have from the start. Just running the CIS benchmark doesn't make you secure. It's going through and giving you a step in the right direction, but you have to have
Right.
that conversation with your security organization.
All right. So I think we're done with the demos at this point, right?
We're all set. Yep, absolutely.
Cool. So there's that output. Awesome. All right. So this has been a fun conversation. I know compliance isn't exactly an exciting topic for most people. Usually you hear that word or you hear security and you start to have nightmares about audits and all the work that's going to come out of this. And, that annoying guy from InfoSec who just won't be quiet about, the things that you just have to have on your servers that he doesn't want. But, it's important. It really is important. And
Absolutely.
I think every time we see, company XYZ on front page news because of breach foo, that should tell you how important security really is.
And
What do they call
understanding
those?
environment.
Resume generating events, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's 100% correct. And if you need to start with understanding what your environment looks like, so you don't have to go through and say we got to lock everything down immediately and as
Yeah.
hard as we can. Start in steps. Start with understanding your organization. Start with just running a benchmark to one of the frameworks, and CIS is a great example of that. So then you can document, hey, at this point in time in my career and or with the organization, we are here. This next quarter, let's see if we can't bump it from like the 67% compliant to, if it's that easy to go to 98% and it didn't cause any
Right.
major issues, that's a
Right.
net win for you.
That's
Plan
a
the
win.
next quarter to go even more. Fantastic.
All
We got
right.
a couple questions.
Yep, I think we have a few questions to answer. So go ahead, shoot. All right. When performing remediation using OpenSCAP, does it have a negative impact on CPU and memory usage? Will it cause high CPU and memory usage?
So depending on your environment, if you've got a very beefy machine versus an edge device, it's going to differ, right? In some regards, like it was installing aid, it's installing a package, so it's the same amount that if you're going to go yum install, which could be a very little bit, but you need bandwidth then. So if you're in an offline or disconnected network, unless you're pointing to an internal repository, your mileage may vary. So is it going to make it a detriment on everything? No, but there's a small overhead that's going to take to be able to go run this.
Yeah, I think this is one of those cases where it's really fair to say it really depends. Depends on what rule set you're applying. It depends on the system you're running it on. Some of those tasks are going to be higher intensity than others. So yes and no. It's hard to say. Hard to say for certain. All right. Do we have any more questions? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's not going to bring the system down to its knees. Was what I would say. There's a slight overhead to it.
Okay. Example: enabling FIPS after install is also non-compliance, right?
So that's a fantastic question. When you go into FIPS, this is a whole nother level. We can deep dive more of that on our next episode, or when we do the stigging as well, because FIPS compliance stig will go. Once you go FIPS, you can't go back. You're talking about a reinstall. So you've got to go through it. If you're going through that level of effort anyway, it helps to be able to go through and enable that from the start. And typically, whether that's image builder or doing that from install time. So it makes it easier. It's not perfect. So if you can do it, if you really want to enjoy pain or into that, that's cool. Go for it. You could do a lot of things.
I love stress and anguish. Let's do that.
Right. Just because you
All
can.
Right. Did we have any more questions?
Some checks manual. Absolutely. Some checks are manual. And like I said before, some of these are procedures or policy based and not based off of the just going and running Ansible or Bash scripts to be able to go through and close this out.
Yeah. OpenSCAP can't, institute your InfoSec security program that maybe is part of compliance, right?
Right.
But it can, change the password policy on the box, right? So there's certain things that it can't do for you. And I don't know that the OpenSCAP policies even contain rules for stuff that cannot be implemented on a system, right? So if you're following something like disastig and there's things in there that are all about process, right, or policy, those are harder to automatically deploy. So yes, you can't just run OpenSCAP and be like, we're done.
Absolutely, right. It is one step in the process. And to David's comment saying more examples might be helpful, like creating before and after reports on compliance with the STIG. That's fantastic information. We'll go through and cover that in the future.
Yep. Cool. More stick examples. Right. Okay. So this actually leads really great into kind of the wrap up of the show, right? So we're not done. There's lots of things we can talk about when it comes to compliance in OpenSCAP. We mentioned other compliance policies, PCI and disastig. Josh is going to come back, I think, in 2 weeks. I think we decided,
awesome.
And we're gonna talk about those as well. Right now, obviously, we've already talked about the OpenSCAP piece, so it's not just going to be another OpenSCAP episode, but we'll work out some more to talk about with those other policies. Next week, those of us that are, folks like me and Scott and Eric, we're all away for a team meeting. So there's not going to be an Into the Terminal next week. But we'll be back 2 weeks from now. I forget what the date is, but 2 Fridays from now with our next episode on compliance and OpenSCAP. So that'll be good stuff. Don't forget to subscribe and, of course, like the show. And we have some next steps. We have a nice lab in there that does a lot of what Josh just showed us how to do. There's an OpenSCAP compliance lab on lab.redhat.com. So you can check that out and try it yourself if you want to. Or, just build yourself a lab VM and do it there. What could go wrong? Don't do it on your production systems until you have please until you have buy-in.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, folks. Josh, you have any last words?
Hey, have fun, go learn something new, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks.